Right, we're live. Hello, everyone. I'll just hand it off to, or I guess my name's Kent, and I'll hand this off to Maria, and she'll take it from here.
Perfect. Hi, my name is Maria Naggaga. I'm a program manager at Microsoft, and I manage Visual Studio and .NET. And I wanted to talk to Kent about what it's like to be a open source project maintainer, because I'm getting ready for OSCON, and I'm going to be talking about how to become fearless about contributing to code. And I thought it would be great to talk to people who actually build these huge projects or these smaller projects or all kinds of projects that encourage people to be part of them. So Ken was recommended. I was so excited when he said, yeah, I'll chat with you. So maybe we can jump into like what your day job is and what project you maintain.
Sure, yeah. So my day job is PayPal. I work on the cross-border send money flow. So if you want to send money to somebody in Germany or something,
Yep.
like a friend or something, then you'd go through the flow that I'm working on. And when I'm not doing my day job work, I do a lot of open source stuff. So I have one major project that's used by I would probably say thousands of people now. It's called Angular Formally, and it's an Angular library for building forms in the browser. So yeah, there's that, and then I have a lot of other projects. Some of them bigger than others. Actually, I have this other project, NG Stats, that probably has about 1,000 users, maybe more as well. I haven't actually looked at the download stats in a long time, but yeah. So I do a lot of open source, and I'm an egghead instructor, and I have two courses about writing and contributing to open source as well. So open source and educating people in open source is really important to me.
That's pretty cool, because I from what you say, you do a lot of JavaScript and HTML. Do you feel that that is a really good language for people to enter into coding and begin contributing to open source?
Yeah, I think like front-end web technologies is a really like has a lot of advantages in the open source space, because the same tool that you're using to discover these libraries can also be used to like preview these things as well. And so like you can as a project maintainer, I can create a website that uses my library really easily. It's really easy to do that, especially with GitHub and GitHub Pages, and like tools like JSBin or JSFiddle, those kinds of things. It makes it really easy for me to to create a demo for this. And then the other nice thing is for the most part, the code that you're looking at GitHub, you're looking at on GitHub, is the same code that's actually running in your browser. So you can even like debug it, and like you can load it as a global and start playing with it. You don't have to download anything, and like set up any kind of environment lots of the time. And so it's JavaScript in general is just a really approachable platform, and that plays really nicely in open source.
In open source. So a lot of open source projects, you find a lot of seasoned developers, like people who have been doing it for a number of years. How do you as a project maintainer kind of encourage people who aren't as experienced to contribute to your code base?
Yeah, that's a great question. So full disclosure, I'm not as experienced either. I've been doing this for just over 2 years now, and that's one of the cool things about the web space, is that it's moving so quickly and things are changing so much that you can just kind of jump in, and you work hard for a while, and pretty soon you're just as experienced in all the latest stuff as anybody else, because it's only been around for a while. So
Yeah.
that's kind of nice. But as a project maintainer, things that that you can do to kind of encourage contribution. I'm actually giving a talk about this at Space City JS. And so, yeah, like lots of this. I'm glad that you're asking me these questions, because it's making me think. But yeah, yeah. So there's one thing that I think that we kind of make the mistake of it in open source is we consider contribution to be only those who contribute code, and that's totally not true. In fact, I would say that most open source contributions are not code at all, and they include things like doing documentation and writing, responding to people who are using the library and who are looking for help, and writing tests and writing blog posts and speaking at meetups and conferences. There are a lot of different things that you can do to contribute to an open source project. So as a maintainer, it's really it's a good thing for you to encourage people to do that. And so one thing that I've done to try to encourage people, and just let them know, hey, like, you can really contribute in more ways than you might think, is on my projects, and lots of the projects that I have are kind of smaller modules. That's kind of the thing in the NPM node community, is really small modules. And so generally they don't have a ton of contributors, like hundreds of contributors or anything. And so on these projects, it's really easy for me to recognize pretty much anybody who does anything at all. And so what I do, though, is I have this specification for recognizing people for their contributions, and it's called all contributors. Here, let me just give you a link. You go to github.com/kentcdodds/all-contributors, and this is just the specification for how you recognize people. And basically what it amounts to is a section in your documentation or on your website. Most of the time it's in a README that's totally devoted to just recognizing the people who've contributed to your project. And it's a table with people's avatars and little emoji representing the different contributions that they've done.
That is amazing.
It's cool. And
cool.
One of I always say his name wrong. Huron Ingalls, he's gonna laugh when he hears me say that. But I need to actually talk to him and find out how to pronounce his name. But he built a tool, a CLI, for automating creating and updating this table. So it's like when I created it at first, I was like, yeah, this is gonna be a beast to maintain. But then he created the CLI, and now it's like you just have a file in your repo called allcontributorsrc, and it's a JSON file. And you don't even have to update the JSON file because the CLI will do it for you. So you just say, add a contributor, this is their GitHub username, and these are the types of contributions they made. You follow a prompt, and it'll just update everything for you. It's awesome. So.
That is a really great way to celebrate people who are contributing to your code.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's research done by Wikipedia in Germany where they found out that they weren't getting the retention that they wanted from new contributors. And if there's a project that needs volunteers, it's Wikipedia. They're a huge project. So the problems that they have are very similar to the problems that we have in open source. And so they tried this experiment where they thought, well, okay, we can't pay people. That not only is that not feasible, but it also research shows that paying people doesn't help with retention. And so they thought, well, what if we gave them some sort of reward? And so they created kind of this campaign where every single month they would take the 3,000 contributors new first-time contributors that they had that month, and whittle that down to 300 for their experiment. And half of those they would give this special award and say, thank you for your first contribution. They'd have a special page for it and list everybody, and then on their profile it would say here's their they got this award, they're awesome. And then they did this for 11 months, and that the group that received that reward were 20% more likely to continue contributing over the next year.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a big deal. And I've noticed in doing this all contributors thing, which is kind of similar for open source, that's totally been true as well. In fact, there have been projects that I had started that I was like, this would be really cool to exist. I'm going to create it, but I don't have time to make it like everything it could possibly be. So I'll just make it as much as I need, and then I'll leave it. And then, but I'll get a contribution, and I'll add them to this contributors list, and then they'll like get really excited and start like making it really awesome. And not only that, but there's this blog post here. I'll search for it. You can see this is something I really care about. I do this a lot. So there's this blog post called Healthy Open Source. I just gave you the link, by Michael Rogers. And he's in the Node community. I can't remember what his title is. I think he's like community manager or something like that. But he describes how the Node community manages their open source project. And one of the things that they do that's kind of unique to open source is they're really open with their who has access to commit to the repository. And so like basically the rule is if anybody makes a non-trivial change, like through a pull request, they get commit access to the project. Which like for me, a year ago, I was really protective of my project. So I was like, I want this to be a really high quality project that people can rely on and depend on. And so I'm going to protect that and only give contribution or commit rights to people who are like really, doing a lot and have a vision for the project. But what happens is you give people commit access and they take it really seriously. And they're like, okay, so like I have been given this trust and I'm not going to blow it. And like the fear is, oh, what if they do blow it? What if they are like really mean and just like blow everything up? Well, like we're using Git these days and it's really easy to recover from something like that.
Exactly.
So yeah, so anyway, those are a bunch of thoughts on things that we could do to encourage people.
So like if you do support like first timers, how do you encourage them to be part of this code base?
If you're just
sorry, I think I echoed a little. So do you support newer developers as contributors? And if you do, how do you do it?
Yeah, so here's another thing. So about a year ago, I created this, on my, actually, Maria, I think we're getting a little echo. Could you mute yourself when you're not talking? There's a hotkey, Command D or Control D will toggle the mute. I use that a lot. It's great. This on my project Angular Formally, I was working on this issue. It was like a pretty simple new feature or bug I was fixing, and I on my libraries it's really easy to do test-driven development. I love TDD. And so I wrote all the tests, or I think it was just like one test I needed, maybe two. And I had it like ready to implement. And then I went to go implement it. And it was like 2 lines of code. It was crazy easy. And so I was like, okay, great, it's passing. And then right before I went to commit the code, I thought, it would be really cool if somebody new got a chance to commit to this project. Like thousands of people use this project. If I were just getting started, I would love to contribute to a project that thousands of people use. And so I decided, okay, this is what I'll do. I was using the Mocha testing framework, and so I just said, I think I had a describe block with my test in it, and I said describe.skip. And so it skipped the test. It wouldn't actually fail anything. And then I removed my implementation, and I committed just the tests. I pushed those up to the repository, and I updated the issue with an extremely detailed step-by-step list of like what needs to happen for this feature to be like finished. And so like it's like, okay, first you fork the repo, and then you clone your fork, and this is how you do that. And then you you put these lines of code right here. I was like, this is dead simple. Nobody can not do this. And so and you enable these tests, and if your job is to get these tests to pass, and this is how you do that. And then you make a pull request, and this is how you do that. And so the catch was, I said, I will only accept a pull request from somebody who's never contributed to open source before. And that was a really awesome experience. It was like just an hour or two before I had a brand new open source contributor contribute their first time open source contribution. It was awesome, and they had a fantastic experience. They were able to do it, and the deal is like these developers are smart developers. Like they can do stuff, and they may be new to the space of open source, or they may be new to the space of developing. But what I'm trying to encourage them to do is contribute to open source. I'm not trying to encourage them to learn everything there is to know about formally. And I'm not necessarily trying to encourage them to continue contributing to my project. I just want them to learn how to contribute to a project and what the process of contributing to open source is like. And so by doing this first timers only thing, it like that made it possible for these people to get into it for the first time. And so this kind of has become a thing. And if you search for issues with the label first timers only, you'll find like 100 or 200 issues that are open and closed from various projects that have like read this blog post and thought it was a good idea. And so a lot of people have entered the open source world because we're saying, hey, we realize that this is a really easy issue for any of you longtime contributors. Let's give these new guys and gals a chance. And I think that was cool.
No, that's pretty good. And I just realized that you did this with Scott Hanselman, didn't you?
Yeah. And you're at Microsoft, so you know.
Scott's my boss.
Oh, nice.
So you're the Kent from First Timers Only.
That's right. Yeah. So Scott, I shared, because Scott recently, or at the time, Scott had recently made a blog post called "Bringing Friendliness Back to Open Source," and I thought, hey, like Scott, we should collaborate on this. Like you link to mine, I'll link to yours, and we did that. And he was like, hey, let's kind of make this a real thing. And so he created firsttimersonly.com, where it kind of gives it's kind of like a blog post almost, with a bunch of resources and things like that. So it's kind of a thing now. I think it's not quite to what we each wanted it to be, but that's kind of a matter of time stuff. Pull requests are welcome.
Because I'm really excited, because one of the things I work on at Microsoft is how do we bring younger developers or newer developers to .NET and C#.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I would love to see is in these repos is that as we're telling people how to get started, it would be nice to have a first timer build a how to get started tutorial. Because
very cool.
Yeah, because sometimes I write them, I'm like, so you know that Entity Frameworks does this, and I'm like, oh, first timers have no idea what Entity Frameworks is, right?
Yeah, totally.
So those are the tiny things that we need to think about that could actually change people's experiences and have more people contribute in different ways, as you said. But also, I love the fact that you had like that detailed of like, okay, this is how you fork it, and this is how you clone it, and this is how you make your first push. And these are kind of the errors that you might experience. Like those are tiny things that if your first push doesn't go well, you're just like, why did I do well? What did I do right? But having like that step-by-step guide, and then being able to have more and more first-timer experiences on open source projects is just this iterative design process, right? You do it so many times, it becomes second nature. And before you know it, they become their own kind of open source maintainer. And we have to think about like, how did you move from a contributor to a maintainer? Like that's a question I would love to get from you, like an answer. Like how did you make that leap? How did you grow up?
Yeah, good question. So I think I might have a little bit of a unique story. Like lots of people are kind of nervous to get into open source and things. I was never nervous to get into open source. I was always excited to jump in. And so actually my first contributions to the open source world were my own libraries. And so I have, like, you can look at some of my really, really old, well, relatively for me, old Java projects, and I hope nobody's using those. But then I have my first JavaScript project is called Genie.js, and it's super cool. And I wish that I was still using it right now because I think it was a pretty cool project. But then I started getting into contributing to other people. There's this site called what was it? Firstpr.me, and you can find your first pull request at this site. It's super cool. And so my first pull request was to the Java Spring project, and it was a comment, a typo. I fixed a typo in a comment, and I think like that is totally a legit first contribution, and I think that more people should do stuff like that because like it taught me how to contribute, and that's a big deal. So yeah, like moving from a from a contributor to a maintainer for me was a little bit of a unique story, but I can talk about the how that worked when I took over the Angular Formally project. So with Angular Formally, I did not create Angular Formally. It was pre-existing, and so I was working on a project where I was going to be doing a lot of forms, and I like doing forms with HTML is a lot of repetitive work. You have a label and that needs a class name, and then you have your input and that needs a class name, and you like a whole bunch of other crazy things. And so it just gets really repetitive. So I wanted to move that to kind of a configuration based thing in JavaScript where I can like use all the wonderful features of the language JavaScript and generate this configuration and give it to something to spit out a form. And so I found Angular Formally, and I was like, this is really cool. And I started using it. I found, okay, this doesn't handle all the use cases I want it to. So I submitted a pull request to add a feature. And then I bumped into another issue. And so I submitted another pull request. And I, over time, was just submitting a lot of pull requests so that this would, add all the features that I needed it to. And the maintainer said, hey, I'm not really using this project very much anymore. Would you be interested in getting commit access? So that like I don't have to, so you can get your stuff in quicker, and like obviously you care about this more than I do, and so that's when I moved from contributor to that project to the maintainer, just by contributing a lot and having a lot of use cases. And I think like if somebody is interested in becoming a project maintainer, this is the word of caution for them. I have this blog post called Open Source Stamina. I'll give you a link to that too. Let's see, open source, no. So yeah, basically the premise of this blog post is you contribute best to something you use regularly. And so like for people who want to get into open source, I would recommend like when you're just getting into it, like contribute to any project, and that's totally fine. Like it's the process of contributing. But if you really want to like be a long-time contributor to something, it's a lot easier and you're a lot more motivated to contribute if you are regularly using that project. And not only is it easier and you're more motivated to contribute to it, but you also like understand the use cases better. And so the problem is that if you like get involved in a project and you become like a really important contributor to that project, when life gets tough or work gets busy, and if you don't have any use cases for that project, it becomes really difficult for you to continue contributing, and then the project will suffer because like you're now a heavy dependency. And so either the project suffers or you suffer because you're giving up time from family or whatever else to contribute to this project that you're not even really using yourself. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit of a word of caution. If you're looking for a project to contribute to, think of all the projects that you use on a regular basis and try to find ways to contribute to those.
That's great. Like, I have one last question.
Okay.
How important is a code of conduct for behavior on your repo, and how have people responded to you having a code of conduct?
Yeah, that's great. I think actually, for the most part, the JavaScript community has embraced codes of conduct. I know some communities are not quite as into it, but For me, I actually have been lucky to never have to had enforce a code of conduct on any of my projects. However, I that may be because I have a code of conduct. And so I adopted the contributor covenant about a year ago, I think, on my projects. It's fantastic. And so the only projects that don't have a code of conduct, the only of my projects that don't have a code of conduct are the ones that I haven't done anything with in a long time. So all the projects that I do regularly, like I contribute to regularly these days, have the contributor covenant on it. I have a generator now that like generates all the files and stuff needed for my open source projects, and that includes the code of conduct. I think having a code of conduct is a way that you can signal to people using your library that like we have standards here, and we enforce those standards. And so like think twice before you say something really mean to somebody. And like that should go without saying, but it doesn't. Like unfortunately, people don't like lots of people in the world don't think when they're speaking. And the other problem is we have a global industry with lots of different backgrounds, and people have like different cultural differences. And so like you have to be careful when reading something from someone, like something that might sound like rude and like really short to me. It might just kind of be the way that somebody communicates. And for those people, like they should probably work on that a little bit, because we should be sensitive regardless of culture. But I think that we need to remember that we should be patient and give people the benefit of the doubt before just like saying, okay, you're blocked from this project. So luckily, like I said, I've never had to enforce my code of conduct, but a code of conduct is really important to me. In my talk that I'm giving next week, I have my first group of slides. I say there are two things that every single project needs to have, regardless of language it's in or anything else. You have to have these two things. And one of them is a license, and the other one is a code of conduct. It's that important. It's just as important as having a license. So yeah, I think we really need to encourage a really strong and friendly and welcoming open source community in general. And so a code of conduct is a really good way of doing that. I also have a podcast that I run called JavaScript Air, and that even that podcast has a code of conduct. You go to github.com/javascriptair/code of conduct, and it outlines. I adopted a code of conduct, and then I also just give kind of a TLDR, because it's a podcast. It's a little bit unique, and I say like, here are a couple of things that are just totally unacceptable behavior on this podcast. Here are some things that we like you to do, and yeah, a code of conduct shouldn't just be like, don't do these things. It should also be like, we encourage this kind of behavior. This is the type of community that we want to build. So yeah, there are just a bunch of random thoughts about codes of conduct for you. Thanks for the question, though. That's really important.
Thank you so much, because like I really enjoyed talking to you, and today like I need to go and contribute even more.
Good.
And I need to like build open source projects that do allow people from all sorts of backgrounds, from like I have no idea to what I'm doing, to like I want to teach others, to like, oh, I'm experienced. Like I want to build that community where everyone's learning from each other. So hearing everything that you said today has been so happy. Like it's made me so happy, and I'm so refreshed, and I'm excited to be doing at OSCON. And thank you so much, Kent. This has been amazing.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad. I enjoy talking about it, and thanks for asking me some of these questions.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, see you around on the internet. Good luck on your talk at OSCON.
Yeah, thank you so much. See you around the internet.
Bye.
Okay, bye.